so much.
Oh, thank you.
Marketplace's Sabri Benishore there. You're listening to the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
The National Ballet of Ukraine's premier U.S. tour features the nation's elite dancers, an immersive scenic 3D screen, and guests Ukrainian Shumka folk dancers. One night only, Monday, October 21st at the Moran Theater. Tickets at nationalukraineballet.com. World Affairs Council and UNF, partnering to engage citizens in becoming better-informed participants in the global community. Featuring David Rennie, The Economist magazine's Beijing bureau chief, on October 7th. More at worldaffairscounciljax.org. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Head of the Great City Symposium about how she views Jacksonville's unique downtown challenges. Then, leading in a time of educational turmoil. We talked to University of North Florida President Dr. Moez Limayem about the school's plans to balance student progress and state politics. And from incarceration to creation, former prisoners find connections through art. Join the conversation. You can join us on air at 904-549-2937, or you can email questions or comments to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us.
In Washington, on Corva Coleman, at least 130 people have now been killed in the southeast by Hurricane Helene. Authorities say damage is beyond catastrophic. President Biden says tomorrow he will visit one of the worst affected areas. It's in Asheville, North Carolina. He wants to see what more help can be offered. NPR's Deepa Shivaram has more.
Biden says there are still many people unaccounted for after the storm and said the storm was a consequence of climate change. Vice President Harris also received briefings after cutting her campaign trip to the West Coast short in order to visit FEMA headquarters in D.C. She offered this message to storm-ravaged communities in the Southeast.
We will continue to do everything we can to help you recover and to help you rebuild, no matter how long it takes.
Harris said that she'll visit affected areas as soon as she can without getting in the way of emergency response. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News.
Former President Donald Trump visited Georgia yesterday. He says he will bring relief materials to the hardest-hit storm areas. Trump also falsely stated that Georgia Governor Brian Kemp was having a hard time reaching President Biden. The Georgia governor refuted that, and Biden accused Trump of lying. Tens of thousands of unionized dock workers walked off their jobs overnight at ports on the U.S. East and Gulf coasts. Daniel Amali is a member of the International Longshoremen's Association. He says the ILA is demanding higher wages for its members and protection against automation that could replace them as workers.
Automation of our nation's ports should be a concern for everyone. The truth is, robots do not pay taxes. They do not spend money in their communities. The ILA would continue to fight until its members receive the fair contract they deserve.
A work stoppage at 14 of the nation's ports will affect American imports and exports of critical goods. For the first time, the federal government is opening an investigation into the 1921 Tulsa race massacre. Two survivors, both over 100 years old, pushed for the Justice Department to invoke the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act, as NPR's Kristen Wright reports.
The Justice Department says it'll review witness accounts, documents, and historical research into what many see as one of the worst moments of mass racial violence in American history. More than 100 years ago, a white mob attacked the thriving black Greenwood district. It's believed hundreds of people were killed, and what was known as Black Wall Street was burned and looted. Congress passed the Emmett Till Cold Case Act in 2008 to seek some form of justice for historically ignored victims of racial violence. The white men who murdered Till were never punished. DOJ doesn't expect there's anyone still living to prosecute in the Tulsa massacre. It'll issue a public report and bring truth to light. Kristen Wright, NPR News, Washington.
It's NPR.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. It's 4 minutes after 9 now. A new trash collector takes over in parts of Clay County today, and your trash pickup day may be changing. This applies only to unincorporated areas of the county, including Fleming Island and Keystone Heights. Also, curbside recycling is now officially over. If you are part of the 1/3 of residents who actually recycled, you'll have to find an alternative place to bring your recyclables. And any hurricane debris should be piled up by the road by October 7th to ensure that it does get picked up. If your home sustained damage in Hurricane Helene, you can now apply for aid from FEMA. President Biden has approved federal disaster assistance for 17 Florida counties. Jack Pogano is the public information officer for FEMA and says you should apply as soon as possible.
Because if you don't apply, you can't get assistance. It's very simple. If you apply, then we will have teams that will go out and assess the damage.
Pagano adds that if you sustain damage in both Hurricanes Debbie and Helene, you must file separate claims. You can apply at disasterassistance.gov. We have a 30% chance of scattered afternoon showers or thunderstorms, especially around 4 p.m. today. Increasing cloudiness, the temperature now just under 80 degrees. It'll be in the upper 80s this afternoon.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Luminescence Foundation, dedicated to shedding light on neurological research focused on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases and supporting land conservation initiatives, and the listeners who support this NPR station.
I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, a watershed moment for Jacksonville's riverfront. Urban innovator Coletta shares her tips for transforming city renderings into reality. Later in the program, from new rules on student protests to the return of an iconic goldfish sculpture, UNF President Dr. Moez Limayem gives us the lowdown on campus life. But first, hundreds of acres of Jacksonville riverfront are poised for transformation. But one transforms a scenic riverfront into a successful one. To help us answer that question, I'm joined on the line by Coletta, CEO of Memphis Riverfront Parks and Partnership and the keynote speaker of the upcoming Great City Symposium. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning, Ann.
So you have been to Jacksonville, Carol. What do you see when you cross the St. Johns River?
A lot of waterfront. You have an embarrassment of riches. You have a lot of riverfront to work with and waterfront to work with. So I think you're, making the most of that asset is imperative. People all around the world, of course, want to live on the water, and they want to be on the water. They want to play on the water. And so the question is, how can you make the most of your extraordinary waterfront? Where do you focus your attention? What do you do next? What do you do after that? What's the strategy for making sure that it's all connected and it all has good spillover effects and that 1 + 1 = 3?
It's funny that you say an embarrassment of riches. I mean, there is this enormous amount of property that is sort of available. Some of it's, planned for, some of it's in development. But is it harder for a city to focus, to target its redevelopment and its riverfront revitalization when there is so much riverfront?
Well, yes, good point. But I think that what should drive the decision about where to focus attention is, again, where the greatest spillover effects will be. So if we develop this part of the riverfront, if we make this the most accessible part of the riverfront, then what is next to it? What can benefit from activating the riverfront? What else would that activate? And what are the benefits of that? So that would drive strategy for me, and it has in our work in Memphis.
So you've been at this work for a while. You just announced you were leaving the Memphis Riverfront Parks Partnership. You announced that in August. It's a nonprofit. It manages 6 miles of riverfront, 5 park districts, 26 properties. So it's a vast responsibility. What is your skill set that you bring to that work? Why do you think that you've been successful at it?
Well, I've been working with cities for many, many years. I I think what set me on this path was a letter that I had written to our then mayor when I was in, I think, in early high school years, telling him what he should do with Beale Street, which was the historic black um, entertainment and business district in the South, and it had been part of an urban renewal. It was moribund, and I just, I thought at that young age I could just tell the mayor, and maybe it would have an effect. And oddly enough, not only did the mayor write me back, but he had the head of the housing authority, which, because it was urban redevelopment, it had control of the property. And I think it was like, oh, well, my ideas could count. And so I sort of went down that path over many years and I've worn a lot of different hats organizationally, but if I look back, it all makes sense because it was all focused on what makes a city successful. And I've had a particular interest in how do you make the place successful, and particularly the places that have outsized importance to cities, like downtowns, like riverfronts. And so that is, it's sort of all of the work that I've done, spoken in many, many places around the world, had a chance to see a lot, see cities and downtowns and waterfronts in many different contexts, understand that everybody wants a playbook, everyone wants a toolkit, everyone wants best practices, but what we can do and can't do in Memphis is very different from Chicago, which is very different from Detroit, which is very different from Jacksonville. So, getting people to learn the right lessons when they look at other waterfronts and try to bring those lessons home is, I think, a bit of a challenge and needs some interpretation. And so I've tried to do that for folks here in Memphis and, and in other places under other organizational banners.
So you talk about spillover, and I think I understand what you mean in terms of something that interacts with, say, a downtown or an area that also has some opportunities for people to join the riverfront or kind of enter it and then return to the downtown. Is it more challenging in a city which, like Jacksonville, has its own challenges in terms of downtown revitalization? Picking that spot that would be appropriate for spillover when it's not really clear, I think, for a lot of people, tourists and people who live here, kind of where that sweet spot is.
Well, you've got a lot of built assets in downtown Jacksonville, right? So making that as active a place, as performing, as high performing as you can make it, is a good thing. That will pay off economically. I think it pays off, from a reputational standpoint, and just a lifestyle, a livability standpoint. I mean, everybody doesn't want to work and live and play in downtown anywhere, but it ought to be an option and everywhere. So I would look at where we already have assets that need more activation. That's a place that, to me, would be a candidate for riverfront development. I also think a good candidate for where you develop a waterfront as vast as Jacksonville is where you can link it back into neighborhoods. One of the great things, for instance, that Detroit has done. Detroit has a very narrow, essentially a narrow linear riverfront. Not a whole lot of land, not a lot of parkland beside it. In fact, it was really quite an awful riverfront, very disconnected. And not only have they joined it up along the river, but in two key places, they pushed it back into the city, meaning not the river itself, but the pathway. So you've got the two the DeQuinder Cut there goes right from the riverfront into the Midtown neighborhood where their market is and so forth. And so it's a bike ped trail right on an old rail line. And that has been enormously beneficial to Detroit. And they're doing the same thing on the other end of the riverfront. And that begins to spill off all kinds of neighborhood benefits. Disinvested neighborhoods are really benefiting from that connectivity to the riverfront. So Detroit, I think, has gotten it really right in terms of how they've approached where they began and how they continue to develop.
If you're just joining us, we were talking with urban innovator Carol Coletta ahead of her keynote address at the Great City Symposium next week. You can join our conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937, or you can email questions or comments to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, or reach out on social media. In this city, Carol, there are people who will list a raft of developments and planned developments that are coming online. We have what's known as the Emerald Trail, which is being built, a good portion of that along the riverfront. There's a Four Seasons being built. There is, major investment on the riverfront next to that. There's going to be a new Museum of Science and History. There's an attraction in the form of a ship, a naval ship. But in this city also, there have been attempts to activate our waterfront that have worked, but have not necessarily triggered that wholesale revitalization. And, we have a North Bank River Walk, we have a South Bank River Walk, we have a Riverside Arts Market once a week on the river. We have once had a very popular kids campus playground that had a splash park and all of these amenities. And despite all of that, it hasn't really caught fire. So what do you think is the it isn't just the amenities, right? There has to be some other element that we're missing still.
Well, one of the things I observed when I was in Jacksonville on the last trip was a lack of connectivity. So you have these interesting nodes, but it's very difficult to walk from one to the other. Impossible in some cases, and very non-intuitive. So the first thing I would start to look at is, what is working best and how do I join that up with something else? So I always believe in starting with strength. Where do we have strength, and then join it up to something else? So that I think connectivity is really missing, and it matters. Design matters, and what lines the riverfront, if you will, matters. For instance, I noticed in the downtown area, as an example, you have office buildings that then have surface parking lots on the river side. So between the office building and the riverfront, you have a surface parking lot. Not a great condition. I was staying, I guess it was at the Hyatt. And, once again, it felt like a very disconnected place. And it had its entrance on the riverfront side, but there was parking. So, and people don't want to walk by a surface parking lot. I mean, that's not what they want to walk by. So, those are some of the things I would look at. It's like, again, where do we have strength? How do we join it up to some other place that has strength? And then what have we really thought about these assets that we're building? There's nothing wrong. It's great that, you're building a Four Seasons or you're building a museum. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as the building, is not a dead building that people have to walk by on the waterfront. It's like, how does it relate to the waterfront? How does it invite people in? How does it create, perhaps shade and cooling and amenities like restrooms, things that you need when you're making a journey on a trail. So if those things can be oriented to the riverfront, then that's really an asset. If it becomes a blank wall on the riverfront, that's not a good asset. I mean, I'm amazed how many museums aquariums. People will build an aquarium on a riverfront, and there's, aquariums are basically internal buildings, right? They're internally oriented, and so it's not as, in many cases, you can't even see the waterfront from the museum or aquarium or convention center or, and you've got sports stadia. Thinking about Cincinnati now, that's so just surrounded. It sits there. Stadium sits in a sea of parking. So those are not ideal conditions for activating anything. And in a car-oriented city like Jacksonville, it's very hard to all of a sudden get to a neighborhood, and you've got some fabulous in-town neighborhoods that are very walkable. But, this notion in real car-oriented cities, the notion of I'm going to park and walk from destination to destination to destination is still a little foreign. People do it at a neighborhood level, but, we've got this mentality that we need to park at the door. And if you need to park at the door, then you can't get things joined up. And when you can't get things joined up, they don't perform. They don't have the spillover effects. They don't perform at an optimal level. Again, it's always 1 + 1 maybe equals 2 if you're lucky. And so, those are conditions that you really just have to bite the bullet and start doing it differently, or you just never get the lift that you want to get from this incredible asset that you have of the water.
Do you think that there is some sort of attraction needed? I know that this city has discussed in the past things like an aquarium. I know some cities have, put up like a carousel or something that is just kind of a in and of itself, a little bit of a draw. I know you've been heavy on park programming in Memphis in terms of events that are scheduled there. But what is it that must be there in order to draw people, aside from just the amenity of a nice space? Because I think there's a lot of nice spaces that people don't necessarily make the effort to go to.
No, but there are also baubles. I call them baubles. The Ferris wheel, the carousel. Those can work, but I've ridden the Ferris wheel once, right? I've done that. Been there. Check that box. That's why it what lines these park spaces, for instance, really matters. The thoughtfulness comes where you plan public space to work with private space, with privately owned space, and make those two really work together. That's what creates vibrancy. I don't say that a carousel couldn't be nice, but a fountain that dances is nice. But if it's not joined up, if it has to be a destination, and it's my destination, I go there, I do it, and then I leave, what's the point? It all needs to work together, and everything needs to make everything else more valuable. These spaces don't have to be activated. If you start to depend on, I have to entertain, this is to me a real problem. If I believe I have to entertain people, right, that's my job. Let me entertain people because that's the only way to get them here. That's a hugely expensive proposition. And entertainment is changing so fast, right? What people expect in entertainment. Look at the movie world, look at the concert world. So I would just be very cautious in assuming that a thing is going to be the ticket. In context, yeah, could be great, but not necessarily if it's not thought about in context and as part of a whole. I think I wouldn't do it.
Interesting. We have a
There
call.
are, look, in this world, there are no magic bullets. There's not that thing. Okay, it's again back to the toolkit. There's no magic thing that everybody wants to do. In a way, you're much better betting on a beautiful space a beautiful public space, a lush landscape, something that gives people relief. And it's like, what can they not build for themselves? What can they not get anywhere else? And I think that's a better bet than, a Ferris wheel, a carousel. Again, those aren't necessarily bad things. It's just got to consider them in the context of what you're building and how many times are people going? I mean, locals, right, don't go ride the Ferris wheel every year, even. So it's just, that's been an obvious move that a lot of cities have made, and I'd be cautious about those kinds of moves.
I want to take a call from Susan in Fruit Cove. Good morning, Susan. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you so much for taking my call. We've moved here from Missouri in 2015, and my daughter came to see us in March of 16, and we could not find any place downtown to go up and see all the bridges at once. So we take pictures, and we ended up going to one of the good hotels, and we, undercover found out that if we went up to the athletic club on the top floor, they might let us in, and we got to go up. It was gorgeous, and we took pictures, and my daughter was so delighted. So I just recommend that we find some high building down there already. Don't build another one, but that we could do that because it was an asset. And then the other thing is that we could not find the Riverwalk. We were there and we kept seeing signs, but no arrows or no pamphlet to show you where. And we knew there was, and we still haven't seen it after 8 years, a mosaic there of the river that some famous artist did, and we've never found it. So there's got to be some signage that gives people a clue as to how to do the Riverwalk.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. It's an interesting comment, Carol, because very often it's, really fun to visit somebody that works in one of those big downtown towers because there really aren't a lot of opportunities to see the river from up high.
I was going to say the same thing with office buildings, reconsidering what they will be and who they will house, and the uses in those office buildings right now. This is a great time to say to somebody, hey, would you consider, doing top floor as an observation opportunity? Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to say is I can't agree with Susan more about wayfinding. It seems so pedestrian, and it's done poorly so often. But, those of us who occupy a space all day, every day. I mean, I live in downtown Memphis and have for many, many years. I mean, I've had my home here. I've lived in other places, but I've always kept a home here. And I am, I know every nook, cranny. I know every shortcut. I know the safe streets, the not so safe streets, the light streets, the dark streets. But, somebody just smacked me in the face recently with a story about, the need for wayfinding. And I thought, oh, brother, it was like, wow, slap your forehead and say, yeah, we have to have wayfinding. And when you think about wayfinding today, it's got to be everything from how do you influence Google and Waze, the digital apps, all the way up, all the way down to, I guess I should say, signage and, how people get around, and is it signage for pedestrians or is it signage for cars or both? All of those things matter. I mean, you can be 2 blocks off of our riverfront and not know it's there, and that same is true, for a lot of waterfronts. So wayfinding, she's exactly right.
I want to take a call just briefly, Jim from Orange Park. We just have a couple of seconds left. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. So one of the things, and I like what the urban developer talked about, is I grew up in Boston and outside of Boston, and we could take the T, the blue line right into Boston. And at that time, growing up, the riverfront in Boston wasn't that great, but now it's a destination of choice. Everything is hooked up. You can walk everywhere. Here in Jacksonville, like you said, people aren't going to park their car and take a bus someplace. So and again, the show a lot of times has talked about infrastructure. And until we get infrastructure, I just don't think, I don't.
Jim, I think we're losing you there a little bit, but message is clear. So, Carol, just briefly, you're going to be in town next week for the Great City Symposium. What is your chief message that you're going to bring?
You have this fabulous asset. Don't let it be a stranded asset. Take full advantage of it. Most cities would die to have your assets. So I think making the most of it is a huge opportunity for Jacksonville.
Well, she's Carol Coletta. She'll be speaking at the 5th Annual Great City Symposium hosted by Scenic Jacksonville. That event is on Thursday, October 10th at the Garden Club at a University. But since taking the helm in August 2022, UNF President Dr. Moez Limayem has championed bold plans for campus expansion and workforce readiness, all while navigating a minefield of student protests and state policies. Dr. Limayem joins me now as the school kicks off a wide-ranging branding campaign. Good morning, Dr. Limayem.
Good morning, Anne. Thank you for having me.
It's very nice to have you. So,
thank you.
You are the 7th president of UNF. You're originally from Tunisia.
Correct.
What drew you to North Florida, in particular, to the United States in general? How did you arrive, and what brought you north?
Oh, that's a long story. I try to make it short. And grew up in Tunisia. I went for undergraduate there at the Institut Supérieur de Gestion in Tunis, and then came to the U.S. for a graduate school, University of Minnesota. Then went to Canada, from Canada to Hong Kong, then Switzerland, then from Switzerland back to the U.S. After 10 years at the University of South Florida, I found my true north at the University of North Florida.
And you're proficient in 6 languages, is that right?
Yeah, depends how you dangerously enough in several languages.
So you are a great example for language proficiency for students at UNF. You have, under your watch, you've seen the freshman retention rate grow to 95%. What does that number signify to a leader of a university?
Yeah, and when we talk about student success, the biggest foundation of student success is really retention. And research showed that retention from freshman year to sophomore year is the critical success factors for students. If you lose them the first year, you cannot talk about their educational experience, their graduation on time, their jobs, their salaries. So that's why we laser focus on retention. And I'm really happy to report that this fall, we achieved the highest retention in the history of UNF. So we have the highest percentage of students returning from freshman year to sophomore year.
You also have a large number of students, a growing number of students who are first generation college students. What does that mean in terms of what services you need to provide your student body, and how the school manages those expectations that they may have?
Great question. And this is personal for me. I am a first generation college student. No one in my immediate family had a college degree. And depending on the cohorts that we have at UNF, anywhere between 30 to 40% of our students are first generation college students. What does that mean? It means no one in their immediate family they can go to for advice on curriculum, on career choices, or even early adulthood challenges. We are that family, and we don't take this responsibility very lightly. We provide them with all the infrastructure, human and physical, so that we give them the mentoring, the advising necessary for them to succeed. Just a few weeks ago, we celebrated our summer graduation ceremony, and I was talking to my colleagues at UNF. I said, please just savor and enjoy this moment, because when students cross that stage and come to me to shake their hands and say congratulations, the family and friends in the stand, that's the very first time they experience that feeling. That's why we have the best job in the world. It is the job of changing the lives of these students one at a time.
So I said earlier that you are the seventh president in the history of UNF. Some big names: Thomas Carpenter, Adam Herbert, John Delaney. Um, who do you think made the most impact during their tenure at UNF?
I honestly think everyone participated in their own way. In the recent history, my really good friend, former President Delaney, the one that really stayed a longer time there and literally built UNF to what it is now. But the same thing goes for every single president of the sixth president there. They really participated in putting solid foundations and putting UNF in the map and getting it ready for us to come and build upon these successes and hopefully take UNF to even higher heights.
And so, what would you like to be your legacy when you look back at some point as a former president of UNF?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Is I really would like my legacy to be the president who transformed the educational experience for our students, the president who truly made UNF that destination of choice for our students, for faculty and staff to make it the best place to work in, for employers to first come to UNF for their talent needs, for philanthropists to come to UNF and invest in UNF, and for our legislators to continue investing in UNF. So that's hopefully my legacy would be UNF is the destination of choice.
In the short term, I've seen that your goal is by 2028, you want to grow the school's enrollment from 17,000 to 25,000. I'd ask you, first of all, why and where do those numbers come from? What drives that metric?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's start with why. If we see where we are located, in Northeast Florida, Jacksonville, a recent study by Wall Street Journal ranks Jacksonville as the second hottest job market in the nation. All statistics point to the same directions. Northeast Florida, Jacksonville is the fastest growing population, or one of the fastest growing populations in the country. And when businesses want to expand here or want to move here, their number one question is, will we have enough talent to cover our needs in terms of human resources? And that's why the decision was made to grow. But I really have to always clarify that it's a strategic growth. We are growing in areas where jobs are needed, talent is needed, such as technology, supply chain, logistics, coastal resilience, artificial intelligence, computer science, data science, and the like. So, and this is not just about getting bigger, it's also getting bigger and better, or better and bigger. So we have big plans. It is audacious, but that's the way we like it. It's the UNF way.
There have been some issues with student housing, a little bit of a housing crunch. I know that there was a couple of years ago, some freshmen were coming, learning they didn't have housing right before school began. And then just, I think earlier this year, rules changed about whether upperclassmen can get first bite at the apple when it comes to housing, because housing prices elsewhere off of campus have really skyrocketed. So what about that need? Do you feel that students, especially if you're looking at growing, your enrollment, that the housing need is going to be met?
Absolutely, and of course, when we talk about growth, it is really important to provide the physical and human infrastructure for our students to be successful. So let's talk a little bit about housing, which is really important for our students. We are now in the process of building another dorm for our honors students. So hopefully it will be ready by the end of the spring, and we have more than 720 beds available. And as we speak, we are also negotiating with private partners to build more dorms on campus. So I really believe we will very well cover all the accommodation needs for our wonderful students.
Would that be a new thing, having a private provider of housing on campus?
Absolutely. New for UNF, not new for other institutions. So at UNF, we're consistently looking for best practices. The good news is, many universities don't have land and don't have money, or they have money but don't have land. Now, we have land and we don't have a lot of money. So that's why we're partnering with private partners, and we're in process of putting the last touches on an agreement that will help us provide actually several dorms in different phases according to our strategic growth.
I'd be interested to know when you think that announcement will come.
Very soon,
Okay.
hopefully, very soon. We are putting the last touches on the legal documents for the agreement, but stay tuned.
Very interesting. What about teacher retention? I alluded at the top of the show to the fact that it is a difficult time for educators in Florida for a lot of reasons, not least because of some state laws that have been changing the rules around things like tenure, changing the rules around what can be taught in the classroom. Is it getting difficult for your? Is it getting difficult to lure and retain educators?
I think it's everywhere is retaining and attracting good talent. That's the number one priority for every university worldwide, for every business and every organization worldwide. And at UNF, we're making a very strategic, conscious effort. And even when we revamped our strategic plan, we made faculty and staff success a top priority. We committed since 2 years when I landed at UNF to make sure that we increase the salaries and the compensation for our faculty and staff.
And how does it compare to other schools?
Yeah, they were not where they should be. It was very clear. Now, at least we have announced for the third year in a row salary raises for our staff. Also, we are negotiating with faculty union another third year raises, and we broke the record for the highest raises in the history of UNF for our faculty and staff. And we understand it's a process. We're still working on it. In addition, making their success a priority, I formed a presidential task force to really look at that culture of belonging. How do we make UNF the best place to work in? Truly, where we wake up every single morning excited to go to our universities and change the lives of thousands of students one at a time. We got some really good feedback, and now we are following up on these recommendations. So again, you will see several changes. It started last week when we had one of the most successful convocation in the history of UNF. We had more than 1,300 faculty, staff, and students celebrate the new year. So, and hopefully with our new way, starting today, of telling the UNF story, we improve the UNF pride. And,
what is it exactly that you are launching today? Like, what does it entail, and why now?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I've heard it many, many times since I've been here is that UNF is the best kept secret. I honestly, and I'm not sure I like it very much. I like the best part of that phrase, but I don't like the kept secret. UNF is incredible institutions. A lot of great things are happening at UNF, and we have been very modest in telling the story. Today is a big celebration at UNF, where we're going to go to businesses. We go to the airport. We go and talk with medias and great reporter like you to, first of all, make sure we thank our partner, we thank our alum, we thank the employers of our students, we thank our community for believing at UNF, but also at the same time telling them UNF is here. It is a resource for this great community. UNF is open for business, and we will tell the story of UNF like it's never been told before.
And you're kind of starting a new motto today, or slogan?
Yes, it's the true north. It's north of everywhere. And it's also personal. I always say, At UNF, I truly found my true north. At UNF, I felt like it is a place where I can soar high. It's a place where I can fulfill my dreams of changing the lives of so many of our amazing students. And also, UNF is and will always be the true north, that compass for all our students, faculty, and staff and community members. It is that first destination of choice.
Talk a little bit about how you are communicating with students. We know that there were limited campus protests last year, not like we're seeing at other schools, but rules changed as a result of that statewide, pretty much. How do you feel students have received those new rules? How do you feel students are doing on campus when there has been a rollback of a number of student led programs and student support programs like the Women's Center, like the LGBTQ Center, those changes?
Yeah. So really, first of all, we talked about protest. I can tell you, I'm really proud of our students. We teach them how to express their ideas, their opinion. How do they do it in a civil way? That's what UNF is all about. But also, we want to do it while we can protect their safety and protect the safety of others. That's really important for us. We want our students to really have that freedom of speech and to express themselves. We're very proud of that, and we will always, and I'm here committing publicly, will always protect their rights for free speech. But we want to make sure it is done in an orderly manner, in a civil way, so that we can assure that UNF is that platform where people actually know how to disagree and know how to express themselves in the most civil way. So we're very keen on protecting these rights. It is true that a lot of misunderstanding about what is allowed and what is not allowed. I can assure you, at UNF, we are also committed to provide whatever it takes to assure the success of all our students, to make sure we provide them with everything they need to be successful. Mentoring, mental health, freedom of speech, everything. We are working. We communicate a lot with our students. I meet regularly with students, different groups. We have more than 200 organizations at UNF, and students organizations and clubs. The laws do not apply to organizations who are funded by students' fees. So there's a lot that can be done to assure the success of our students, and we are making sure that that is absolutely done.
And just personally, do you lose a lot of sleep these days, just kind of anticipating or having to be strategic in terms of planning how to lead your organization at a time of this increased scrutiny and conflict and divisive conversations around education and academic freedom?
Yeah, the good news is I'm a good sleeper, so I don't lose a lot of sleep. But in all seriousness, and it is a top priority for us. The success of our students is really a personal affair for us. We wake up every single morning, all of us, and we realize that student success is a team sport. So yes, we wake up every morning thinking, how do we assure the success of students in terms of their retention, their the quality of the education they are getting, them graduating on time, and more importantly, how do we prepare them for success post graduation, either through great employment with competitive salaries, or moving on to graduate studies, or even starting their own business. Yes, it is a top priority. It is our mantra at UNF, and this is what also keeps us going every single morning.
And just briefly, Goldie, the sculpture, the goldfish sculpture's back?
Yes, that was a big celebration last week when we celebrated the convocation for the new year, and it's incredible. I truly underestimated how popular Goldie is, the sculpture. Yes, it is back. It is new, shiny, wonderful, and it is yet another piece of our incredibly beautiful campus. So please come and say hi to Goldie.
Right. Thank you so much for being here, President Moez Limayem. Really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Up next, from incarceration to creation, former prisoners find connections through art.
Who do you want as a keynote speaker at Teach?
I would like to hear from Vincent Taylor.
I plan to use Vincent Taylor songs in my classroom.
Vincent Taylor? He was amazing.
I love Vincent Taylor's passion for education, and I want to hear more.
Join us at Teach for Vincent Taylor's keynote on Saturday, November 23rd. For more info, visit wjct.org/teach.
On the next Fresh Air, Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about his trip to Senegal, where he reflected on his ancestors' enslavement, and his trip to Israel and the West Bank, where he got a first-hand look at the ongoing conflict. He's known for his book Between the World and Me and his Atlantic cover story, The Case for Reparations. His new book is called The Message. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
Every presidential path to victory leads through Pennsylvania, so it's no exaggeration to say that the election could be decided by voters in just a handful of Pennsylvania counties. We'll get to know one of them, Cambria County in western PA.
Even though there's so much attention on Pennsylvania, a lot of these parts of western Pennsylvania that I think do feel left behind and kind of forgotten.
That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
President Jimmy Carter turns 100 on October 1st. As president, he brokered huge trade deals and negotiated peace agreements between Israel and Egypt. And in the decades since he left office, he's continued to champion humanitarian work and promote democracy around the world. Celebrating a century of Jimmy Carter, next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. An upcoming exhibit showcases the work of formerly incarcerated individuals with a focus on hope. To tell us about it, I'm joined now by Michael Bell, UNF faculty member and former gallery director at UNF. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Amanda Mahan, Chief Communications Officer for Operation New Hope. Hey, Amanda.
Hey, well, thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for being here. And artist Michael M. Good morning, Michael.
Oh, good morning.
So, Michael, what is the idea behind curating this exhibition of works? What's the kind of foundational idea?
Right. So this exhibit will be at the Lufrano Intercultural Gallery at UNF. And our goal is to highlight cultural experiences and to bring those stories to life and to kind of create connection points. So we're always looking for opportunities to highlight and showcase art and artists that might not always be at the forefront of what you would see in a gallery, what you'd see in a museum. So this was a really interesting opportunity to partner with a local organization, to partner with local artists and people who have gone through this amazing journey, and to showcase their work and their accomplishments.
And Amanda, this is work that's created as part of an art therapy program through Operation New Hope, which focuses on reintegrating what are sometimes called returning citizens into their communities. How does art fit into the goal of Operation New Hope?
Yeah, thanks. So our core program, Ready for Work, is a reentry program providing support and training to people coming back from the justice system. And as part of that, we have a mental health piece. So each of our clients are paired with a mental health counselor, a job coach, and a case manager. And part of the mental health piece is unpacking kind of the trauma or experiences that maybe got people involved in the justice system in the first place. So we hold weekly art therapy group sessions with our clients who are going through the career development training, just to give them another tool to help find their voice, process their emotions, and heal and rebuild their lives.
Yeah, and art can obviously be a very healing endeavor. How did you decide that exhibiting some of this work would be of interest to your clients, or the university community.
Yeah, it's our 25th anniversary this year at Operation New Hope, and so we wanted to think of a really creative way to celebrate the impact we've had in the community over the last 25 years, and you know, lifting up the voices of our clients so that they can kind of tell the story of the impact that the programs had on their lives. And what better way to do that than through art, through writing, music? The clients can use their art as a way to show where they are now and how the program has helped supported them reach their goals.
Yeah. And Michael, you are an artist by nature. I mean, you've been a tattoo artist throughout your life. But you are now working in a different medium. Tell us a little bit about the kind of work that you're creating now, why you're not doing the tattoo art anymore.
Okay, so as a tattoo artist, in that realm, I became highly addicted to drugs, right? So I had to escape that. And going through Operation New Hope, I had gotten introduced to art as a therapy, right? And not only that, they provided me with an opportunity to work with other addicts and alcoholics in a detox facility. And in that facility, a opportunity came up to where I could use my expression, use my skills as an artist to help bring other people into creating to cope with the moment that they're in, which is really difficult. And I remember it myself being very difficult coming into a new reality. So essentially, I've had to abandon what I've always known, but I've been able to keep the creative side of it so that I could, move through life.
And so what do you primarily do? Like, what are your preferred artistic styles?
Well, I love mixing everything together. I love it. I love to first, iron out a concept, with my hands, drawing or whatever it may be. Sometimes painting, sometimes using colored pencils, whatever, mixing it all together, putting it through a digital medium, and then putting it back onto a canvas, and then reorganizing it and telling a story while I'm doing it.
Now, I think we're able to see some of your artwork on our live stream right now, and it is a mix of influences.
I did that in jail right there, and that's actually telling the story of my heroin addiction and the possessive state that I was in, feeling though I was like taken over by demons. So when I started that one, when I was sitting in jail, it was all about me releasing the darkness from inside of me and putting it into a medium to where I felt like I was taking demons out and exposing them to the light.
It's really interesting. And Michael, how do you curate this kind of, I'm guessing, very different kinds of artwork?
Yeah, well, we've worked very closely with Amanda and her relationships with the clients and the people who've gone through the program. And the interesting thing for me is I've kind of been in this place where we're talking a lot about hope at UNF and how that fits within the arts. And for me, hope and creativity are like this part of the same ingredients, right? And so it's hard, maybe impossible, to create something if you're without hope. And so it's been really interesting to see the creative expressions that have come out of this program, and to curate that. I mean, it's all about telling a story. It's all about telling a story about how these people have found hope in the midst of hopelessness.
It's called The Art of Hope. It is exhibiting at the Lufrano Gallery from October 10th to November 8th. And there's a reception October 10th. Amanda Mahan, Michael Bell, Michael M., thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having us.
And that's our program. Tomorrow,
Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
The Museum of Science and History presents Mission Astronaut, a new exhibition exploring life in space. Mission Astronaut is open September 21st through January 5th. More info at mosh.org. Arbus Magazine's new Fall Arts and Cultural issue has dropped and is currently available. Articles include a celebration and review of the Jacksonville Symphony's 75th anniversary, as well as the Ritz Theater's 25th anniversary. More info at arbus.com.